The void outside listening post 7 was a tapestry of ancient stars, cold and indifferent. Inside, Kaelen, a signal linguist worn thin by cosmic dust and solitude, watched his console flicker with the usual static. Then, a ghost of an anomaly, a faint anomalous energy signature, quivered, almost imperceptible, amidst the hiss of deep space. Kaelen's quarters were a testament to functionality over comfort. A narrow bunk, a fold-out desk, a single personal terminal. His days were a monotonous cycle of diagnostics, reports, and the endless silent watch. As he prepped his nutrient paste, his gaze drifted to a small, faded photograph tucked into his terminal's frame. A group of faces, smiling, from a mission long past. A shadow, heavy with unspoken history, crossed his weary face. He was here at the galactic edge for a reason. A penance for a past he couldn't outrun. Back in the sterile hum of the central operations room, the faint signature from earlier returned, now bolder. A more complex ripple across the holographic display. Kaelen leaned closer, his brow furrowed. It wasn't a conventional comms burst, nor a data packet. His analytical mind, trained to dissect countless alien dialects, found no logic, no structure, no discernible pattern within this energy. It was a hum, an echo, a presence that defied every known classification protocol. A quiet apprehension began to coil in his gut. The rhythmic thrum of an approaching shuttle broke the station's silence. Commander Valerius, a woman carved from granite and procedure, strode into the docking bay, her uniform crisp, her gaze sharp. "Kaelen," she greeted, her voice devoid of warmth. "Your reports on an anomalous energy signature, anything more than a sensor ghost? Or a prolonged stress reaction?" Her words were a clinical dissection, a challenge to his quiet conviction. Kaelen, tired but resolute, met her gaze. "It's neither, Commander. It's different." Valerius merely raised an eyebrow, her skepticism a palpable shield against the unknown. Late that night, alone at his terminal, Kaelen tried to force the signal into a quantifiable box. But the more he probed, the less it behaved like data, and the more it felt like an intrusion. Fragmented, disturbing mental images began to flicker at the edges of his consciousness. A ruined cityscape, crumbling spires reaching for a sky that wasn't black, but utterly empty. And then, the star, a gaping, lightless maw swallowing everything. The imagery was too vivid, too familiar. It was the same dead city, the same oppressive black star that had haunted his nightmares since his last assignment, the one that had sent him into this desolate exile. He clutched his head, a cold dread seeping into his bones. The dream arrived with the force of a physical blow, dragging Kaelen down into the familiar abyss. This time, it wasn't fragmented. It was whole, vivid, and terrifyingly real. He stood amidst the ruins of the dead city, a colossal metropolis of crumbling spires and shattered glass, all bathed in the sickly, bruised purple light of a star that was not merely dim, but eaten. A black void where a sun should have been, sucking the warmth and color from everything. The air was thick with the dust of ages, tasting of ash and forgotten sorrow. He recognized the intricate, skeletal latticework of a collapsed tower, the precise angle of a tilting bridge, details etched into his memory from the archived logs of his previous mission, a mission he'd tried desperately to forget. He stumbled, gasping, sweat-soaked, as the cold reality of his sleeping quarters slowly reasserted itself, but the oppressive black sky lingered behind his eyelids. The nightmare was back, and it felt like a warning. The mess hall hummed with the low thrum of the station's life support, a stark contrast to the silence of Kaelen's recent dream. He nursed a lukewarm synth coffee, trying to shake the lingering chill. Ensign Jax, a new recruit whose youthful optimism hadn't yet been scoured away by the void, slid into the seat opposite him. "Rough night, Kaelen?" Jax asked, rubbing his temples. "Had the weirdest dream. Felt like I was walking through a ghost city, all these impossible buildings, under a sky that was wrong. Like someone had punched a hole in the universe." Kaelen's hand tightened on his mug. Jax's casual words were like a cold spike to his gut. The impossible buildings, the sky that was wrong. It was too precise, too familiar. The dread he'd fought to suppress for years clawed its way back, confirming his deepest, most terrifying fear. Commander Valerius's office was as austere and unyielding as its occupant. Kaelen stood before her desk, the recycled air humming with unspoken tension. "Commander, the signal? It's doing something to the crew," he began, his voice tight. "Ensign Jax, others. They're having the same dream. The dead city, the Black Star. It's exactly what happened on my last posting, Commander. It drove them mad." Valerius steepled her fingers, her gaze sharp, unwavering. "Kaelen, I'm aware of your history. Your last crew experienced a psychological event, yes. But attributing every instance of crew stress or shared anxiety to an alien dream is unprofessional. You're projecting. It's likely a psychological contagion, exacerbated by your known trauma, a common phenomenon in deep space isolation." Her words were a shield, impenetrable, leaving Kaelen isolated in his growing terror. Dismissed but not deterred, Kaelen retreated to the station's archived data library. The dimly lit server room hummed with the ghosts of forgotten information. He accessed encrypted logs from his previous mission, a desperate search for validation. Pages of clinical reports scrolled across the flickering screen. Psychological deterioration, Crew Delta 7, shared delusional states, catatonic episodes. Then, the chilling details. Crew member testimonies, almost identical to Jax's, describing the crumbling spires, the oppressive void in the sky, the feeling of eternal silence. He found crude sketches, drawn by hands long since stilled, depicting the ruined city under the Black Star. The cold, objective language of the reports only amplified the horror. It wasn't just Kaelen, and it wasn't just a dream. It was a cyclical, insidious horror, and it had claimed others before. The station was a small, sealed ecosystem, and Kaelen watched the infection spread. In the recreation room, a technician muttered to himself, tracing phantom outlines on a dusty table. In a corridor, two crew members spoke in hushed, anxious tones about their nightmares, their faces etched with exhaustion. "The shadows were so long," one whispered, "like the buildings were bleeding darkness." Kaelen overheard another sketching on a datapad, the image slowly forming into a disturbingly familiar, ruined edifice. Sleep deprivation became rampant, replaced by a pervasive, unspoken anxiety. They moved with a new cautiousness, glancing over their shoulders as if expecting the dream's architecture to materialize around them. The once sterile, functional environment of Listening Post 7 was slowly, subtly, being stained by the Phantom City. Commander Valerius's office was stark, efficient, but now cluttered with the grim detritus of Kaelen's past. Printouts and schematics from the Stardust mission were scattered across her gleaming desk, a stark contrast to the usual sterile order. Kaelen stood opposite her, his weariness momentarily eclipsed by a fierce, almost desperate resolve. "Commander," he began, his voice low but firm, "this isn't stress. It's not a contagious psychosis. This is real. These logs from the Stardust are irrefutable. The identical symptoms, the shared hallucinations, the complete psychological collapse." Valerius, her face a mask of grim skepticism, picked up a report detailing a former crewmate's final, incoherent entry, her brows furrowed. "A psychological anomaly, Kaelen, I grant you that. But a shared, true-to-good dream? That's a leap." Her gaze, sharp and analytical, met his. "Prove it's not simply a latent psychosis triggered by extreme isolation and your own documented trauma." Kaelen didn't flinch. "I intend to." The air between them crackled with tension, a grudging understanding forming in the face of an impossible truth. The operations room hummed with a different kind of tension now, one born of scientific intrigue mixed with chilling discovery. Kaelen and Valerius stood before a main console, holographic displays shimmering with the anomalous signal's intricate patterns. "We've run every known linguistic algorithm, every data compression model," Kaelen explained, his voice hushed with a strange awe. "It's not communication as we understand it. No syntax, no semantic structure. Yet, when we overlay brainwave patterns from the affected crew, there's a resonance." On the display, complex neural activity pulsed in eerie synchronicity with the signal's fluctuations. "It bypasses auditory processing entirely," Valerius murmured, her skepticism warring with the undeniable data. "It's not heard, it's felt." Kaelen nodded, a cold dread coiling in his gut. "A direct neural input. A dream language, perhaps." or something far more ancient and profound, designed not to convey information but to impose an experience. The implications were staggering, elevating the threat from psychological to profoundly alien. Kaelen found Ensign Jax huddled over his personal station, the dim light of the operations room casting long shadows. Jax wasn't working. He was drawing. His intense, unfocused stare was unsettling, his hand moving with a meticulous, almost ritualistic precision. On the datapad, intricate, disturbing details of the dead city emerged, spiraling towers that defied terrestrial physics, crumbling bridges spanning chasms of impossible depth, all under a sky of obsidian. "Jax," Kaelen said softly, placing a hand on the young man's shoulder. Jax didn't flinch, his eyes remaining fixed on his drawing. "It's growing, Kaelen," he whispered, his voice detached, ethereal. "The city. And the shadow. It watches, always watches." Kaelen felt a familiar, sickening lurch in his stomach. Jax was describing the same presence from his own nightmares, the same invasive feeling. He saw himself in the young ensign, the same descent into an inescapable mental labyrinth. "Jax, look at me," Kaelen urged, trying to pull him back, but Jax's gaze remained distant, lost in the spectral architecture of a dying world. The comms and shielding room was a scene of controlled, yet desperate chaos. Red lights flashed, warning klaxons sounded faintly, and the air crackled with sparks from overloaded conduits. Valerius barked orders, her voice strained, but each technical report was a testament to futility. "Power fluctuations in sections Gamma 7 and Omicron 2, a technician yelled. "Shielding integrity at 60% and dropping. The signals bypassing the gravitic filters." Kaelen watched, a quiet despair settling over him. They were trying to fight a ghost with a shotgun. Every attempt to block or filter the signal only seemed to intensify its psychological effects. Crew members, already on edge, clutched their heads, muttering about vivid dreams, their eyes darting to phantom horrors. Valerius, her face etched with worry, slammed a fist on a console. "How is this even possible?" she demanded, but Kaelen knew there was no conventional answer. How could you fight a threat that resided in the very architecture of the mind? Later, on the quiet observation deck, Kaelen stared out at the cold, indifferent stars. The vastness of space offered little comfort, only a profound, silent mirror to the emptiness he felt. He connected the dots, the pieces of the impossible puzzle snapping into place with chilling clarity. The signal's non-linguistic nature, its direct resonance with brainwave patterns, the recurring dream imagery of a dead city under a black star. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't even a message in the traditional sense. It was a memory, a lingering psychic echo. He theorized it was not a transmitted message, but the residual projection of a catastrophic event, the final, collective mental imprint of a dying civilization. A cosmic scream across the void. The realization brought a profound, chilling empathy, transforming the terror into a tragic, existential dread. What if the nightmare wasn't trying to hurt them, but to warn them? The sterile glow of Listening Post 7, once a bastion of order, now seemed to flicker with an unseen, insidious current. Kaelen walked the corridors, his worn boots echoing in what felt like an increasingly alien space. On a diagnostics screen meant to display ambient radiation, a fleeting image rippled, not data, but the stark, skeletal outline of a colossal ruined tower, its dark silhouette momentarily blotting out the starfield. It vanished, replaced by static, then returned, a phantom on the periphery of perception. A technician, huddled over his console, muttered about a recurring glitch in the optical sensors, swearing he'd seen crumbling buttresses reflected in a polished bulkhead. Kaelen felt the chill seep into his bones. It wasn't just in their heads anymore. The dream was seeping into their waking reality, like a poison slowly tainting the air they breathed. In the operations room, Commander Valerius was a figure carved from granite, her posture rigid, her voice a strained rasp as she barked orders. "Containment protocols Alpha 7! Reroute all non-essential power to primary shielding. We need to isolate this anomaly." But her words, once commands, now sounded like desperate pleas against an unseen tide. A junior officer whimpered, staring wide-eyed at a holographic display that was now a swirling vortex of distorted, impossible geometry. Valerius strode to him, her hand hovering, then falling as if unsure how to touch a mind unraveling. Kaelen watched, a quiet observer to her losing battle. He saw the subtle tremor in her hand, the frantic dart of her eyes as she, too, caught glimpses of impossible shadows dancing in the periphery, her rational mind struggling against the encroaching madness. Even her formidable will was no match for a threat that defied all logic. Kaelen found Ensign Jax in a quiet corner of the mess hall, huddled against a bulkhead, his eyes wide and vacant. Jax wasn't sketching now. He was simply describing, his voice eerily calm, almost serene, as if recounting a memory. The spires, they stretch so high, Kaelen. And the light, it's not light, it's just absence. A black star, swallowing everything. He paused, a shiver running through him that seemed to have no root in fear. And the shadow it watches. Always. From the tallest ruin, overlooking the dust. Kaelen felt a cold, dread clamp around his heart. Jax wasn't just remembering. He was living it, narrating the alien nightmare as if it were his own. The dream now finding a voice. A chilling, invasive presence speaking through the young ensign. Driven by Jax's chilling descriptions and the increasingly vivid intrusions into his own waking thoughts, Kaelen retreated to his private analysis terminal. Complex star charts glowed around him, data streams flowing like rivers of light. He pushed his mind to its breaking point, fueled by a desperate urgency. The non-linguistic signal, the brainwave resonance, the architectural echoes Jax described. Kaelen fed every scrap into his algorithms, searching for a pattern beyond comprehension. Hours blurred into a feverish haze of calculations and correlations. Then, a single red dot pulsed on a distant stellar chart, an ancient, forgotten stellar remnant near the galactic edge. It wasn't a star at all, but a gravitational anomaly, a cosmic scar. The source. He had found it. A profound, terrifying clarity washed over him. The nightmare had an origin point, a physical anchor in the vast, indifferent cosmos. The station was failing. Alarms, once sharp and insistent, now pulsed with a dying, erratic rhythm. Kaelen moved through the crumbling facility, a silent witness to the widespread psychological collapse. A technician mumbled incoherently, clutching a datapad that displayed only static. A security guard stood frozen, staring blankly at a wall, lost in a waking nightmare. In the medbay, the medic sat slumped, unable to offer aid to those whose minds, not bodies, were breaking. Essential functions flickered and died. Life support systems groaned, lights dimmed, and the low hum of the station's engines began to falter. Listening Post 7, humanity's farthest reach, was losing its battle against an enemy it could not comprehend, dissolving from within. Kaelen was alone, a solitary consciousness amidst the wreckage of breaking minds, the last hope against a cosmic horror. What secrets are hidden in the heart of the shared nightmare? Kaelen braced himself, the neural interface cool against his temples. Jax, pale and still, sat beside him, the glowing cables connecting them both to the station's core processors. A new gamble, a desperate attempt to pierce the veil of the shared dream. Kaelen initiated the link, a surge of unfamiliar energy coursing through him. Immediately, he was no longer in the sterile operations room. A kaleidoscopic rush of images, not his own, flooded his mind. Alien cityscapes, impossible angles, towering structures that spiraled into an oppressive black sky. This wasn't a dream he was observing. It was a dream he was inhabiting. He gasped, a guttural sound lost in the sudden, overwhelming tide of collective emotion. Fear, profound and primal, mingled with an aching sorrow, a sense of loss so vast it dwarfed any individual grief. Fragmented alien, thoughts, not words but pure, raw concepts, pulsed through his consciousness. End. Empty. Silence. Cold. Kaelen felt Jax's presence, a faint, guiding thread in the overwhelming chaos, pulling him deeper into the heart of a terror that was not his. Yet, now, irrevocably, became part of him. When even the skeptic believes, true horror has begun. Commander Valerius stood a few paces back, her face a mask of professional concern, yet her eyes betrayed a dawning horror. She watched as Kaelen's body twitched, his muscles rigid, a thin sheen of sweat on his brow. Jax, meanwhile, remained eerily serene, a faint, almost otherworldly glow emanating from the neural link. The impossible truth was undeniable, manifesting in the profound physical toll on Kaelen and the unnerving calm of Jax. Valerius, a woman who lived by data and logic, felt her pragmatic facade crack, then shatter. The sterile hum of the operations room seemed to amplify her internal struggle. She whispered, her voice barely audible above the console's quiet thrum. This isn't stress, Kaelen. This is something else, something utterly beyond our understanding. Her hand trembled as she reached out, then pulled back, unable to touch the scene unfolding before her. The quiet intensity binding Kaelen and Jax was a force, a tangible presence that transcended all her training, all her skepticism. Fear, cold and profound, settled deep within her. What if the dream is the final breath of an entire civilization? Back at his terminal, Kaelen, though exhausted, felt a chilling clarity. The overwhelming flood of collective consciousness, the raw, unadulterated emotions, the recurring motifs of the dead city and the Black Star, it coalesced into a terrifying new theory. It wasn't just a memory or a lingering psychic echo. It was something far more profound, far more tragic. He stared out at the vastness of space, a silent, indifferent canvas for his dawning horror. What if this wasn't a signal, or even a passive recording? What if it was the asterix's last psychic gasp of an entire civilization? A species, facing extinction, had poured its collective being, its final thoughts, its despair and terror, into a desperate, non-linguistic scream across the void. They weren't transmitting a message, they were projecting their death. Kaelen posited it to himself, a chilling whisper in the silence of his mind. They were experiencing the death dream of an entire species, a cosmic monument to a lost civilization, echoing forever through the fabric of space. The thought was heavy, laden with a melancholy that transcended human understanding. How do you prove a dream, and what will it cost? Kaelen turned from his terminal, his eyes burning with a new, urgent light. Commander, he began, his voice hoarse but steady. It's not a dream, not in the way we understand it. It's a terminal projection. The collective consciousness of a dying civilization, broadcasting their final moments across the galaxy. He gestured frantically at the data on his screen, a mosaic of impossible patterns and neural readouts. This isn't just affecting our minds, it's a living testament to an extinction event. If we don't understand this, truly understand it, the implications for all sentient life are catastrophic. Valerius, still shaken from witnessing Kaelen and Jax's shared ordeal, listened intently. Her skepticism hadn't vanished, but it was now tempered by a desperate, open-minded caution. Kaelen, she said, her voice strained. I see the effects. I acknowledge the anomaly. But a death dream of an entire species? Before I commit the remaining functional crew to anything more, I need irrefutable proof. Something tangible. Our lives, and perhaps more, depend on it. What do you propose? Kaelen's past nightmare returns. This time, he's living it again. Sleep offered no refuge. Kaelen was plunged into a nightmare, vivid and horrifying, yet terrifyingly familiar. It wasn't the alien dream this time, not directly. It was dream, a direct memory of his previous crew's final moments on the ill-fated vagrant's call. He was there again, in the flickering, dying lights of that old listening post, surrounded by the distorted faces of his colleagues. Ensign Anya, her eyes wide with terror, scratching at her own skin as she muttered about the shadows in the dead city. Commander Thorne, once so resolute, now sobbing, sketching impossibly intricate alien architecture with trembling hands. Kaelen saw himself, younger, frantic, desperately trying to pull them back, to make them see reason. But the dream consumed them, their faces contorting in silent screams as the spectral towers of the Black Star's city rose around them, crushing their minds. leading them to their inevitable, tragic demise. He heard their muffled cries, felt their despair, tasted their fear. Kaelen woke with a violent jolt, gasping, drenched in cold sweat, the phantom echoes of their terror still clawing at his throat. The past wasn't just a memory, it was a prophecy. In the operations room, Ensign Jax sat motionless, eyes fixed on an unseen horror. Kaelen knelt before him. The neural interface gear spread between them. Jax, once a beacon of youthful optimism, now held an unsettling serenity. "It wants to show you," Jax whispered, his voice thin, distant, yet utterly clear. "The dream. It's waiting." Kaelen's heart hammered a frantic rhythm. To use Jax, already so deeply immersed, felt like a terrible trespass, a further descent into the madness he swore to fight. Yet, Jax's unwavering certainty, a chilling echo of the dream itself, offered the only path forward. He was no longer just a victim. He was a guide, an unnerving bridge to the abyss. Kaelen swallowed, the metallic taste of fear sharp on his tongue. He had to go deeper. As Kaelen began the careful setup of the neural interface, a flicker on his auxiliary terminal caught his eye. A pure, untainted fragment of the alien signal, previously masked by the overwhelming dream static. He isolated it, amplified it. It wasn't language, not data, but a raw, visceral feeling, a burst of profound fear, of crushing despair, yet interwoven with an undeniable, desperate urgency. A scream across the void, not of malice, but of a dire warning. It struck Kaelen with the force of a physical blow. The nightmare wasn't an attack, but a dying civilization's final, desperate plea for understanding. A cosmic shriek for help. His terror began to morph into a chilling empathy, a tragic realization of the signal's true nature. Kaelen turned to Valerius, his face etched with grim resolve. "The signal isn't trying to harm us, it's warning us. But to understand, I need to go in. Deep." He gestured to Jax, still serene, still waiting. "Jax can be the bridge. He's already there." Valerius's expression was a mask of professional stoicism, but her trembling hand on his shoulder betrayed her. "You risk everything, Kaelen. Your mind, your life." He nodded. "I know. But if this warning is what I think it is, we have no other choice." Valerius met his gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible odds. "All right, linguist. Prepare emergency protocols. We go in." Her voice was stark, a commander facing the last, most desperate resort. With a deep breath, Kaelen activated the neural interface, a complex web of glowing fibers connecting him to Jax. A jolt, a dizzying rush of sensation. His consciousness merged with Jax's, then plunged headlong into the signal. The operations room faded, replaced by a kaleidoscopic vortex of light and shadow, alien memory swirling around him. Fragmented lives, entire histories flashed past, overwhelming his senses. He felt the collective despair, the crushing weight of a dying world. It was disorienting, terrifying, yet undeniably profound. Valerius watched from the console, her face tight with worry, monitoring Kaelen's spiking vitals. Kaelen grunted, a primal sound lost in the mental roar of 1,000 alien voices. He was in. Kaelen found himself adrift within a vast, ethereal cityscape. The crumbling buildings, the oppressive black star. It was all there, but now imbued with a tragic clarity. He wasn't just seeing a nightmare. He was reliving it. He witnessed the alien civilization's final moments. Their brilliant scientists, faces contorted in horror, discovering the black star's destructive, all-consuming power. He felt their desperate attempts to escape, to build vessels that would never launch, to send warnings that would never be heard. Their ultimate, inevitable failure. The dream's true face was not malicious. It was the raw, collective agony of a species facing existential doom, projected across the cosmos as a final, desperate warning. Kaelen found himself drawn, not by force, but by an irresistible pull of understanding, to a central nexus within the ethereal cityscape. It pulsed with a dying light, a swirling vortex of fading memories, yet held a terrifying, singular coherence. This was the architect. not a being of flesh or circuits, but the last, most concentrated fragment of a vanished civilization's collective consciousness. It communicated not with words, but with a torrent of pure, unadulterated thought. Kaelen's mind reeled as images flooded his perception. Stars, once distant and benign, now warped and twisted, their light devoured by an unseen, growing void. He saw entire solar systems imploding, planets ripped apart, not by external force, but by a malevolent, cosmic hunger emanating from what could only be the black star. It was a gravitational anomaly, yes, but also something more, an asterisk presence of absolute annihilation, slowly, inexorably consuming the galaxy. The horror was not just in the destruction, but in the chilling inevitability of it all. Back in the operations room, the real world seemed to splinter around Commander Valerius. Kaelen's body connected to the neural interface was racked with violent tremors, his muscles spasming, sweat beading on his ashen face. His pained gasps were the only sounds breaking the sterile hum of the equipment, each one a desperate struggle against the immense information overloading his mind. Valerius, her face etched with a fear she rarely allowed to show, barked urgent commands at the console. "Vitals spiking! Neural activity off the charts! Stabilize him, damn it!" But her voice was tight with helplessness. There was no protocol for this. No medical training for processing the death dream of an entire civilization, let alone the galactic threat it unveiled. She could only monitor, her hands hovering over emergency disconnects, praying the knowledge wouldn't consume him entirely before it could save them all. The truth, whatever Kaelen was experiencing, was a burden too immense for any single mind. Kaelen awoke slowly, the sterile scent of the medbay a sharp contrast to the cosmic decay of his recent journey. His eyelids, heavy with exhaustion, fluttered open to reveal eyes that now held a profound, haunted wisdom, as if they had witnessed the end of all things. Valerius and Jax leaned over him, their faces a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Kaelen, are you with us?" Valerius asked, her voice hushed. He pushed himself up, ignoring the tremor in his limbs. "The Black Star," he rasped, his voice raw but urgent. "It's not just a dead star, it's a cosmic predator. Its gravitational field is expanding, consuming everything. The signal, it was a warning. A final, desperate plea from a dying civilization that tried to stop it, to warn others. It's coming for us. For everything." Valerius and Jax exchanged stunned glances, the enormity of his words hanging heavy in the sterile air. Kaelen had returned, but the burnt-out linguist was gone, replaced by a messenger of cosmic doom. As Kaelen spoke, something shifted on listening post 7. The lingering psychological effects that had plagued the crew began to subtly recede, like a tide pulling back from the shore. The phantom flickering of light stabilized. The strange, fleeting architectural illusions vanished. Crew members, still shaken and disoriented, began to stir from their catatonic states, blinking in confusion, murmuring confused questions. Valerius, now moving with renewed purpose, turned her attention to the scattered personnel. "Jax, help me reorient the engineering team. Get the life support diagnostics running. We need to assess damage, get comms back online." Jax, pale but resolute, nodded, already moving among the dazed crew, offering gentle encouragement, a shared trauma now a strange bond. The immediate psychological siege was over, its purpose fulfilled. The dream had delivered its message, and now the station, though scarred, could begin its slow, uncertain recovery. The nightmare had lifted, but the warning remained. A stark, terrifying reality. In the operations room, Kaelen moved with a newfound, almost feverish intensity. He no longer felt the oppressive weight of a punishment assignment, but the immense burden of a universe-spanning purpose. The architect's message wasn't just what they saw, but how they felt it, he explained to Valerius, his fingers flying across his console. The despair, the awe, the inevitability. It's a non-linguistic encoding, a direct psychic imprint. We can transmit that. He began to design a new, complex signal pattern, layering mathematical constants with resonant, emotional frequencies, embedding the very essence of the alien death dream. Valerius, now fully on board, oversaw the station's massive main antenna array. "Maximize power output," she ordered, her voice firm. "We need this signal to scream across the void. Every parsec, every sector, every sentient species must feel this warning." The localized horror had birthed a galactic imperative, a legacy of a lost civilization now entrusted to humanity. The operations room hummed with a different kind of tension now, not the frantic panic of madness, but the solemn weight of immense purpose. Through the vast viewport, the colossal main antenna array of Listening Post 7 stretched into the void, a metallic skeleton against the canvas of distant stars. Kaelen, his face pale but etched with a new, resolute intensity, ran his hand over the console, a final, almost reverent check. Beside him, Valerius stood tall, her gaze fixed on the array, her earlier skepticism replaced by grim determination. Ensign Jax, recovered from his trance but still bearing the subtle marks of his journey into the dream, watched the sequence unfold with quiet awe. "All systems green, Commander," Kaelen reported, his voice steady. "Encoding is complete." The architect's final echo translated into pure, non-linguistic dread and warning. Valerius nodded, her jaw tight. "Initiate transmission, Kaelen. Send the echo." A deep, resonant thrum vibrated through the deck plates, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of space. Outside, the antenna array began to glow, a brilliant, unique energy pulse blossoming from its core. It wasn't a beam, but a wave, a ripple of pure, translated trauma expanding silently into the vast, indifferent cosmos. The light reflected in their eyes, a beacon of desperate hope, a monumental act of interspecies communication. Kaelen felt a faint, familiar resonance, the lingering ghost of the dead city, now repurposed, sent forth as a cry. The warning had been sent. Will anyone hear it? The immediate surge of power subsided, leaving behind a profound silence. The operations room, no longer a chamber of impending doom, had transformed into a command center reborn. Valerius turned from the viewport, her shoulders squared, her gaze sweeping over the console displays that now monitored the outgoing signal, charting its projected trajectory into the galactic arm. Her voice, crisp and authoritative, cut through the quiet. "Listening Post 7's mission parameters have changed, effective immediately," she declared, her eyes meeting Kaelen's. "We are no longer merely listening. We are watching. This station is now humanity's forward sentinel, dedicated to monitoring the Black Star's expansion and ensuring the Architect's warning is heard, understood, and acted upon." She paused, then stepped closer to Kaelen, a rare, almost imperceptible softening in her stern features. "Signal Linguist Kaelen," she stated, her tone formal. "Your unique connection, your courage in the face of incomprehensible psychological warfare, and your unparalleled insights have not only saved this crew, but have provided humanity with its first, desperate chance against an existential threat. You have my full commendation and my unwavering support in this new, vital role." Kaelen met her gaze, a quiet acceptance in his tired eyes. The weight of his new purpose settled upon him, heavy but purposeful. This outpost was no longer a punishment. It was humanity's first line of defense. Later, Kaelen found Jax at his personal station, no longer sketching haunted ruins, but meticulously analyzing the subtle nuances of the outgoing warning signal. The young ensign, though still pale, carried himself with a new maturity, a quiet determination that replaced his former idealism. His focus was sharp, his movements precise. "It's beautiful, in a terrifying way," Jax murmured without looking up from his screen. "The way you've woven the raw emotional data, the visual memory, it transcends language, it wants the experience." He finally turned, his eyes, though still holding a flicker of the nightmare, now clear and earnest. "Thank you, Kaelen, for not giving up, for not letting me get lost in it." He paused, then added, "It's strange. That horror, it felt like it broke me. But now, it feels like I can understand things I never could before, a different kind of sight." Kaelen offered a gentle smile, a rare expression on his weary face. He simply nodded, a knowing acknowledgement of the profound, transformative trauma they had both endured. The nightmare changed Jax. Now he's ready to fight back. Night fell, or rather, the station's internal cycle simulated its descent. plunging Kaelen's living quarters into a soft, artificial gloom. Alone in the Spartan room, Kaelen lay on his bunk, his eyes open, staring at the muted glow of the ceiling panel. He still felt it, a faint, almost imperceptible hum beneath the surface of his thoughts, a residual connection to the architect, to the vast, dying consciousness he had plunged into. It was no longer the oppressive weight of a nightmare, but a subtle, lingering resonance, like the ghost of a melody. He rose and walked to the small, polished surface that served as his mirror. He looked at his reflection, seeing not the burnt-out shell he had once been, but a man profoundly changed. There was a new depth in his eyes, a wisdom born of cosmic horror and immense tragedy. Sometimes, in the periphery of his vision, he could almost see the faint outline of a crumbling skyscraper, a flicker of a black sun reflected in his own pupils. It was a bittersweet bond, a permanent link to a lost civilization, a reminder that he was no longer just Kaelen the linguist, but Kaelen the sentinel. He found a strange comfort in this connection, a profound, enduring purpose. The dream may be over, but Kaelen will never be the same. He stood on the observation deck, the vast, silent galaxy stretching before him, an endless tapestry of starlight and nebulae. The station was a minuscule beacon at the edge of it all, its massive antenna array still pulsing faintly, sending its silent, desperate warning into the void. Kaelen watched the endless stars, knowing their shared nightmare, their tragic truth, was now adrift in the cosmos. He wondered if anyone would understand, if anyone would listen, or if the Black Star, an unseen, patient predator, would eventually claim them all, just as it had claimed the architects. The galaxy watches. But for how long? Kaelen's focus was absolute, a quiet storm of intellect and empathy. He stood before the holographic displays in the operations room, his fingers dancing across the interface, shaping the raw data of the architect's final moments into a new, universal language. It wasn't about frequencies or mathematical constants anymore. It was about resonance, about imprinting the raw, terrifying emotional truth of a dying civilization into patterns that bypassed linguistic barriers. He adjusted a complex wave, watching as its fractal geometry shifted, mirroring the despair and urgent warning he had experienced. "The fear is the key," he murmured, more to himself than Valerius. "Not fear of us, but their fear. The terror of the inevitable." Valerius, standing beside him, observed with a newfound respect. "A language of dread, then?" she asked, her voice hushed. "A bridge of shared cosmic horror." She understood now. This wasn't just data, it was a profound, desperate plea. He stood on the observation deck, the vast, silent tapestry of stars stretching before him, an endless, glittering abyss. Kaelen was no longer the burnt-out linguist, exiled to the galactic fringe. That man had died in the heart of an alien dream, reborn as something else entirely. He was a sentinel now, a guardian of a truth too terrifying for casual thought, forever bound to the echoes of a lost civilization and the encroaching shadow of the Black Star. His isolation, once a punishment, had transformed into a profound, almost sacred burden. He carried the weight of an entire species, final breath, a responsibility that transcended humanity. His watch was not for himself, but for every nascent intelligence flickering across the cosmos, unaware of the silent, approaching doom. Then, a faint tremor on the deep space scanner. A small, almost imperceptible blip, distinct from the cosmic background noise. Kaelen's breath hitched. "Valerius," he whispered, his voice tight with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Magnify that signature. Origin point 347 gamma." Valerius moved swiftly, her fingers flying across the console. The blip resolved into a complex, non-linguistic energy signature, mirroring the intricate patterns Kaelen had crafted. It wasn't a message, not a reply in words, but a profound, chilling echo of recognition. Jax, leaning over Kaelen's shoulder, his eyes wide, murmured, They heard it. They felt it." It was a shared tremor of dread, a silent acknowledgement across light years. Humanity was not alone in its understanding. Kaelen closed his eyes, and the cosmos opened within his mind. He saw it, the ripple effect of their desperate transmission. On a world of crystalline cities, multi-limbed beings recoiled from their data streams, their intricate sensory organs overwhelmed by the sudden, invasive nightmare of a dead star. In subterranean caverns, an ancient chthonic race stirred from millennia of slumber, their collective consciousness bombarded by visions of crumbling spires and a consuming void. He saw academic councils dissolving into frantic research, military fleets diverting their courses, leaders across 1,000 worlds grappling with the same chilling dream. Some were terrified, paralyzed by the incomprehensible cosmic horror. Others, more resilient, began to prepare, their scientists racing against an unseen interstellar clock. All were united by the nightmare, a shared, silent scream across the vast, indifferent galaxy. The Black Star's shadow was finally beginning to fall across more than just one lost civilization. Years bled into decades. Listening Post 7, once a mere speck of exile, had become a monument, a constant, unwavering beacon at the galactic edge. Kaelen, his face etched with the lines of time and cosmic wisdom, stood on the observation deck, his silhouette stark against the infinite star field. The Black Star was still a distant, unseen threat, its inexorable march a slow-motion apocalypse. The station continued its broadcast, a silent scream across the void, a testament to a forgotten civilization and humanity's enduring, fragile resilience. He was an eternal sentinel, forever bound to the echoes of a dying world, watching, waiting. The Black Star was coming, and Kaelen, the burnt-out linguist who found his purpose in a shared nightmare, would be waiting.